I wish that we all understood as a species that we can choose our interpretations of life. We can have generosity and charitable interpretations of ourselves, not delusional, but charitable. And we are not subject to our scripts and our history. Those are things that have occurred, but they're not definitional. And we don't have to carry them into the future and keep perpetuating them. We have so much power.
Hello, I'm Dr. Linda Ulrich, and welcome to the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast, where you'll hear from innovators in a wave of goodness and progress well underway in the world that almost no one knows enough about. Yes, the people in this wave are solving some of the world's most vexing problems, large and small, and they still think the world is a beautiful place and that the future is bright. We need to know what they know. And on this podcast, you're going to always walk away with some wonderful insights to use every day in your own life. Today, we have a guest that's just going to blow the lid off your sense of creativity. I know not all of us think of ourselves as creative people. If you do, you're going to be taking it to a whole new level. And if you don't, I think you're going to have a fresh perspective after today's interview. Sunni's favorite quote is, "Creativity is not something you have or don't have. It's a byproduct of a way of being in the world." And today we're going to share with you the ways we can be in the world that inspire creativity in ourselves and everyone around us. Sunny has this great way of looking at life as one long, continuous mistake. Now, I know that sounds strange right off the bat, but you'll hear early in this podcast why looking at life that way brings more joy, less fear, and a lot more of our inner potential can be realized. So, Sunny is an amazing person. She's been named one of the 100 most creative people in business from Fast Company. On Twitter, she was named one of the 10 most creative. Sunny has been featured in every major US publication. We're talking New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Wired magazine. She's been on CBS Sunday Morning twice and on the Today Show. Oh, the pearls that you'll get from this interview are so many. We'll talk about how to discover your own zone of genius and be really proud of it. We'll talk about how to recognize and cultivate these rare moments of flow that we often get into with others. And then also things like celebrating your own uniqueness and finding the gift in adversity. You might have to listen to this episode twice or more to get all the juice out of this one. Sunny is a creative, beautiful person who doesn't come from an ideal background, and yet she is changing the world. She proves that we all have that same capacity. Okay, let's get with it. Welcome, Sunny Brown. Okay, so welcome, Sunny Brown, to the
Thank
Conspiracy of
you.
Goodness podcast.
I love seeing you. I love it.
Oh, I am so glad to have you here. I think we just ought to dive right into this wonderful way that you look at life and the world and creativity and all the kind of things that are available to and actually life calls all of us to every single day. So
Oh,
here
yeah,
I want to set people up. Here's Sunny's life motto: Shoshaku Jushaku,
that's right.
which means one continuous mistake.
Yes, that's right.
Let's talk about that right from the beginning, because most of us are pretty uncomfortable with mistakes, but it takes a
Totally.
creative like you to open us up on that topic.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for bringing in my motto because it's really meaningful to me. And it doesn't mean I have mastered it or anything. It just means that it's something I return to over and over. And I'm having this memory of a story. So, I like you and I interact with a lot of kind of high wattage people. And this one woman in particular, she was telling me that the scariest thing she ever did, and she's like executive, she works at like really high levels of government and business and has like high pressure environments. And as she said, like the hardest thing she did, the thing she couldn't stay with was an improv class. like she went to Second City, completely had a panic attack and like could not return, right? And
Okay.
so, in a way, that motto touches on this notion of groundlessness, meaning that things are constantly unpredictable and they're shifting underneath your feet and you don't know what's going to happen and you don't control what's going to happen and you have to stay with. And even if you stay with long enough, you might even enjoy the process, but it's very fraught. as you know, it's very fraught and very stressful and terrifying. And like, that's why I chose it as my life motto because, you
Well,
know,
I shared with you yesterday that one of my favorite ways of being is wrong. I love being wrong.
love that you said that.
I know that sounds so weird, but
I
I
love
love
it.
being wrong because
Mhm,
I think, "Oh my god, what was I thinking?" And
mhm.
then it being wrong allows me to feel like I made a leap forward. Like the
That's so
mistakes I made yesterday, I won't make today because I
mhm,
was wrong and I figured it out and now I'm
mhm.
that much better.
Yeah, and I mean, that tracks, Linda, and I have to be I have to, like, warn you in advance, I ask podcasters questions also.
Okay, good.
So,
Okay.
I'm curious about because one way to think of that is growth mindset, that's sort of the modern way of thinking of it, there's, like, a frame for it, but I
Mhm.
am curious about, did your parents raise you that way?
Yeah. Yeah, my parents were far from perfect, but my mom put any creative impulse I made, she put something in front of me to do something about
Oh,
it.
that's awesome.
Oh,
That's
and
amazing.
I would sit in my dad's back room, the workshop, and do things with colored electric wire and colored tape, and I made bottle cap earrings. I would collect all the shiny bottle caps at the basketball games, make
Uh-huh.
earrings and jewelry, which she let me wear to school.
Wow, so they were
Yes.
encouraging of that kind of experimentation and practice and
Yeah,
stuff.
how about you?
Well, I wasn't parented, and I was more like a feral, like a wolf, like a so that's a whole other conversation, but I will say that I was thinking about this, about life, like, I think if anything taught me that, it was life itself, meaning
Mhm,
that I was constantly a little bit in over my head in environments that were not really stewarded well by
mhm.
adults, or the adults were just missing. So there's actually sections of my life I refer to as the Lord of the Flies sections, but like, because you had to figure out shit, you had to figure shit
Yes.
out, and you sometimes had to figure it out fast. And
Mhm.
so I haven't ever wondered how that informs creativity in the, like, in a the way that most people perceive of being creative, which is like sort of shipping, like
Mhm.
making something and shipping. But I think of it as problem solving, like really rapid problem solving and adaptation, and not personalizing messing up. It's like, I know a lot of people, when they mess up, it's like really disastrous. There's like disastrous internal consequences when people make mistakes. And that's just not true for me. You know,
Okay.
it doesn't mean I don't criticize myself or have, lamentations about performance. It just means that it's not sufficient to stop me. And the reward of the activity is far greater. And
Yeah.
so that's why I adopted it as a practice, like a life, like an inspiration and a life practice, and really a calling card to other creatives who are like, yes, I want to, like this guy. You recommended this book to me.
Yes, yes.
I just got it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I know. It came today. I was like, perfect timing. But so I think he gets it, that same notion. But it really, the insight about the value only comes with practice, and if you don't step forward, like you just said, there's no, you got to be wrong. Just period. The
Yes.
end. You just have to blow it.
Yes.
I've blown it so many times. But yeah.
Over and over and over. Well, I
Mhm,
think one of the things, that we've just discovered, if there was
mhm,
ever a thing that we might discover today, is that, though we were parented very, very differently,
mhm.
and so maybe parenting doesn't have as much of effect
Yeah, I
on.
wonder.
Right? My
Yeah.
my mom never controlled. She wasn't one of those persons who put stuff in front of you to create and then made sure you had the right teacher and then made sure you were
Uh-huh.
doing it and hovered over you to. No, I don't even think she knew where I was half the time if I was
Well,
in the
that's true
basement.
for me too, though. Yeah.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
were I think it we can't blame or
Right,
excuse
right. They
or.
don't get all the credit or all the blame.
Yes, that's right. On parenting, there was something in us both that just,
Yeah,
looked at maybe we looked at experimentation differently.
yeah, and
Maybe we go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, I didn't mean to interrupt, and I think curiosity is also, like, probably native to you and native to me in
Yes.
some way, right? Like, the endless fascination with new phenomena and new opportunities and new possibilities. I mean, I can't, like, I think we discussed that you buy books constantly and I buy books constantly, and it's like, because it's like you never know where they're gonna take you. And so I think that's kind of an indication of a state of mind that is probably partly biological,
Mhm.
and reinforced or not reinforced depending on environments. But yeah, I think there may be some unstoppable aspects of
Mhm.
just wanting to run into life and be alive and,
Mhm.
and learn and love and trip. Yeah.
And we're going to come across and mention a whole lot of things that you and I have discovered are great assets in this creative way that and this
Mhm.
experimental way we think. So I'm going to tell people
Yeah.
right off, if they see me writing, it's not
Mhm.
that I'm doing my grocery list. I'm going to make show notes as I go so
Oh,
that I
cool.
make sure that in our show notes in the article on the Goodness Exchange website, it might not be in it won't be in
Oh, yeah,
Spotify
that's fab. I've seen
or
them. They're
yeah,
so
but
helpful.
if you go directly to the Goodness Exchange website, which is the mothership of this
Mhm.
podcast, you will find extraordinary show notes with everything that Sunny and I mention, like
Mhm.
that book that you just held up briefly.
Ruben.
Let's just
Yes.
share that with people because I had it.
Creative.
It's
Yeah.
called The Creative Act by Rick. What's his
Ruben.
Rick Rubin? Okay.
He's a music producer, and I'm sure of many other things, but that's how I knew of him.
Well,
But
and you know how I came to tell you about that book? One of
mm,
the other most creative people I've known, a guy named Arthur Zards. He owns the license for one of the oldest and largest TEDx conferences in the
oh,
country.
awesome.
He's a
Yeah.
good friend of mine, and he and I share books almost every week.
You
And
must meet the most fascinating people.
I tell you, it's extraordinary, and I'm trying to take responsibility for that and make sure I connect people all the time. And I've already
Oh,
got 4 people I'm going to connect you to. So
oh, thanks.
yes,
That's
you
why I was
guys.
like, if you were making your grocery list and it was for a dinner party, that'd be fine.
Well, I recognize these moments. Okay, let's talk about
Yeah.
this. I
Mhm.
recognize these moments where 1 plus 1 would equal 2, but there's
Mhm.
some other thing happening, and 1
Mhm.
plus
Yeah.
1 will make 11.
Yes. It's so interesting you brought that up because I have this whole like line of thinking around collaboration research,
Mhm,
and I refer to that as like a third entity. I mean, I'm just sort of branching out into what you might have been referring to, but I do like to create environments in which the individuals become sort of a collective force, and there's like an emergent thing that happens that's surprising and
mhm.
impossible without everyone together. And I think of it as a third entity. And it's temporary. It
Yeah.
comes and then it goes, and sometimes it doesn't emerge, and it's, like that. So I think I understand what you mean, like in an
Well,
embodied
that was a
way.
question I was gonna ask you, later on in our interview, but we're pretty close to it, I think. Is that what you were talking about in some places where that I read about you about collaboration literacy?
Yes. Yeah.
Talk to
Yeah.
us a little bit about that, because I'm sure most people that listen to this podcast have to work with others every day, if it's not
Oh,
only just their family at trying to get everybody out in the
well,
morning.
that's right. That's exactly right. It's really interesting that you pointed it out because it can be a mundane thing. Like it's not it has to be some sort of elaborated, orchestrated, designed experience. I mean, we're constantly in co-creative activities with the world and even with our internal systems. And so for me, collaborative literacy is like this really gorgeous fluidity of interaction, and you can apply it in work settings, and I do that with my teams. But for me, the thing that is so compelling and interesting about it is that it's this sort of dropping of the me-ness, the obsession with like I'm the star and I'm the expert and I hope I look good and I hope I'm presenting well, and it's more about setting other people up to be successful and bringing out the best in others and create and going toward something together. And it's
Mhm,
it's like making music, or like playing sports, and you're just in flow. It's just really beautiful. So that's a whole other body of work that keep leaning toward because
mhm.
I've been doing versions of it for a long time, but it's just seductively. It's just so seductive. It's like yes,
Well, because 1 plus 1 can make 11 sometimes.
exactly,
I'm sure that
exactly.
everyone who's listening to this podcast have had that moment in a group.
Hmm.
It happened to me just recently when everybody seemed like in a harmonious
Nice.
energy that was
That's
just
amazing.
full of wonder. I know I was at a 4th of July picnic,
Hmm.
and it was a very diverse group of people. Some very conservative politically, some very liberal, some artists, some heavy duty kind of crabby business people. It was such, and it was like 36 pontoon boats out on the lake. This party was right on the edge of a lake in
Mhm.
Vermont. How good could that be? It was a
Nice. Pretty
gorgeous
solid.
night. They had
Yeah.
a band, and 36 pontoon boats full of people had pulled up real close to shore to enjoy this band and so forth.
Oh my god.
So when the host, got up on the stage and opened the party officially, the band had been playing for some time. He had us all sing the national anthem with this
Oh.
country western band from Nashville,
Uh-huh.
leading us. And
Uh-huh.
I'm telling you, I got goosebumps right now,
Yeah.
both arms. There was a
Yeah.
moment when I knew all these people because lots and lots of them were my patients and how different they all were.
Oh, wow.
But everyone was in a moment of
Oh,
synchronicity then.
common interest.
And it was, yeah, and it was so complimentary and so big.
That's
It felt like
amazing.
the whole thing was much bigger than all of us. And then it went away.
Yeah,
And then
that's what I'm saying. and as it does, and it's like that's why I think that the for me the if it ever arises, I'm thrilled, and I don't expect it to. It's like something that you can't. It's some alchemy, mysterious
yeah.
alchemy that you can't necessarily. You can create the conditions for it and hope that it emerges,
Mhm.
but it's also just something moves through. And
Mhm.
we're a part of it, and we can, celebrate and enjoy. I love that that happened. I was downtown Portland on a bridge during July 4th, and I remember wanting that to happen because there was like a lot of different people on the bridge, and I was just like, they did try to lead in the song, and I sang with full gusto, knowing that I probably would be like one of the only, but it was just sort of like patchy singers, like,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, and but it's exactly what I'm talking about. These
Yes.
like
Okay.
spaces
So
where you can be
we
yourself.
can't go past this subject without saying
Okay.
that we have to not be such in a rush through life. The way
Oh.
Seth Godin put it to me, I'll put that in the show notes, the link to my interview with Seth Godin. The way
Mhm.
Seth Godin put it was, it's like we're all just standing on one foot, getting something done over here as fast as we can before we get back to what we were doing. And we're
Mhm.
never truly present
Mhm.
with the people we're working with.
Yeah.
We're in this standing on one foot state of mind.
Yeah, I
And
think
so
we're kind of a little intoxicated with
how do you get
stress.
people to really stay present with each other? Because that's the
Mhm.
challenge, right? Who knows how
Yeah,
many people on your bridge were doing
yeah.
12 other things, taking pictures with their cell phone or chatting or but when we get in groups that we're collaborating with, you got any tips on how to get everybody to
Well, I mean,
be present?
and this sounds very Luddite-esque, but it's like, yeah, the digital interventions aren't particularly helpful.
Mhm.
Like I do design online facilitated experiences where collaborating is happening, and that is totally possible and doable. I've been to events where it's been done, etc. But when most of the time it's a disruption because it's not smoothly integrated. And
Right.
so, I mean, first things first is just get people to like be in their bodies and look at each other, you know, just like on a basic level, just ground into the actual lived experience of where you are,
Mhm.
and then look and listen. And then when I have that basic thing, then we have all kinds of activities to support people connecting. And it's kind of like I listened to your interview with Flint twice, the Flint
Yeah.
Sparks one that you just released,
Yeah.
and it's in the same vein of what he described about sort of softening the barriers to connection. And so there's lots of ways you can do that, right? Like storytelling is super uniting if people can listen, and also asking people questions that are open-ended questions and letting them speak into that space and just holding the space. So that doesn't have to be complicated, you
Right.
know, but
Right.
like even just respectful listening and curiosity will go a long way. And so, but as a facilitator, yeah, there's all kinds of fun things we can do. Yeah.
Well, now, okay, so let's dive into curiosity because
Mm.
you and I have something in common in that as my kids were growing up, I really encouraged them to make mind maps.
Nice.
Oh, the hours I spent with one daughter
Did
in
you?
particular making huge, I got the newsprint
Wow.
paper pads, the really big ones, and
Did
so
you were
many.
you exposed to Tony Buzan then like a long time? Oh, so you
No,
just
I just think in those sort of
Yeah.
complex terms of so many things that seem
Yeah.
unrelated, but when you're forced to put it on a piece of paper, you start to see the
Yeah.
relations. So
Yeah.
talk to us, because this is I should tell people that remind people to check out your TED Talk. You have a TED Talk that has over 1.6 million views for a reason. It's about doodling. I mean,
Yeah.
you're kind of famous for being the doodling woman.
I know. I didn't mean to do that. It wasn't like a life goal, but I was like, okay, let's go with it. Yeah.
Okay, but it's so true. I mean, the area that we're at here in curiosity and doodling and
Yeah.
creativity and collaboration,
Mhm.
gosh, uh,
Yeah.
take us anywhere you want to go on any of that. Here's one sentence that I'll start you
Mhm.
off on.
Mhm.
You said to me in our pre-interview that creativity is a byproduct to a way of being. Most of us think of creativity as something we got to be, or we got to
Uh-huh.
work hard to be, or we
Mhm.
got to try and do that thing. But
Uh-huh.
you said it's a byproduct of a way of being. Like, how are you in the world? And then you
Oh,
are creative.
yeah, it reminds me of a Martha Graham quote. Do you know who she was?
Yeah, the
She was
dancer.
yeah.
Yeah.
I used to I finished a couple keynotes with one of her quotes, which was about keeping the channel open.
Hmm.
And it was about, it's not, I think in summary, it was like, it's not your business to worry about how what you make is perceived or even appreciated
Mm.
or how good it is. It's not your business to compare it to other people's acts of expression. It's your business to keep the channel open. And so, right? Like so good. So good. And so what came up for me when you were asking about the byproduct of it, because I think that creativity, and I actually think the point Rick Rubin is making in this book, or one of many, is that it is a natural state. Actually, it's a create be like, it's not a rarefied condition that you have to earn or be born with. And I know that people have addressed this mythology many times, and it still doesn't quite sink in, but it's really a function of like receptivity and curiosity and just getting out of your own way and like not judging and critiquing so much and just sort of letting things happen. So
Ah,
even like cooking, just like the basic act of cooking is a deeply creative act if you let it be, you know but if you get real precise and sort of persnickety and perfectionistic about it, some of the joy is not there. I know if you're baking is a different thing.
yep.
But you know what I mean. But it's like,
Yeah.
there's always ways to suddenly find the creativity in yourself, simply by dropping all the unnecessary judgments and perceptions and opinions,
Mm, mm.
you
And
know
I think the same probably works in our family life. What
mm-hmm.
if we drop some of the assumptions we have about our 14-year-old, or
Yeah.
the constant sort of contempt critique for our spouse or
Oh
our
my God, I know. My husband and I,
right?
like, yeah, because it's so, there's this, so Byron Katie, she's like
I
a
know.
personal
Yes.
development lady.
Yes, yes.
There was I don't know why I keep remembering quotes from like great ladies, but there was something she said where she goes, we're always out of each other's business, meaning like he's just doing his thing, and I don't need to overlay his thing with my perceptions of how he should be doing his thing. Like he's just doing the thing. I mean, it was a healthy relationship. I'm sure he wasn't like attacking her or anything.
Right, 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 right.
But the attempts to sort of force people to conform into our notion of what should be is
Right.
a very tempting thing to do. And my husband is especially good at it. Like, I told him, I was like, man, there's times I have like a creative workshop, or I will soon again have one. And I'm so glad, because when I'm in there, no one is telling me anything. It's like, like if I'm out, my husband's like, there's a way to do things. I mean, he is working on it, but still, it's
Yeah.
like he's always over my shoulder telling me a different or better approach,
Yeah.
and I'm not asking for it. And so I'm like, with the mansplaining, stop with the mansplaining. It like I have to go
Mm.
to my space. Yeah,
And that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing with coworkers and
yeah,
and kids, even
of
nieces and
course.
nephews. Like if they aren't asking for us to give
Right, for coaching. Like, I'm not soliciting guidance.
exactly.
I had to learn that from Flint, actually, who, because he's my teacher, he's one of my teachers, which was, what is the contract? What is the implicit contract and the explicit contract that you're in with a person? It's really hard. So, for example, so I might be watching somebody struggle inside of a marriage, and I might have, or a relationship with their child, and I might have insights that would be valuable. And I might even have a solution that might help them, or research or a referral or whatever. But if they're not asking me for it, then my approach to introducing it needs to be either very diplomatic, very skillful, very delicate, or just not there, because they're not asking for my help. And so I had to learn that too,
Yeah.
and I still do. I mean, with your partner, you just get
Yeah,
lazy,
I know.
and with your kids, you're like, because it's all the time. Like
Yeah.
they're just so constant. But and that's why I say one continuous mistake.
Yeah.
You just mess it up, and that's how you know you messed it up, and then you learn, and that's redeeming in itself.
Mhm.
That
Absolutely.
that commitment is redeeming.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back,
Cool.
we're going to learn some more about all different ways to think about. Oh gosh, Sunny and I got our pre-call going, which was supposed to be 45 minutes, and an hour and a half
An
later.
hour and a half, I know.
So I think
Surprise.
this interview will be much like that, just a running here and there of
Yeah.
insights. But
I hope
let's.
that's okay, Linda. We can go back to the format if you need to. I can obey. I can be obedient.
All right, let's take a break, and we come
All
back.
right.
We'll have more with Sunny Brown. You know how the constant negative noise in our digital lives feels like it's reaching a boiling point? Now, many of us have tuned out the news and social media almost entirely. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. There are newsworthy stories about amazing progress, innovation, leaps in human potential, and wonders in the natural world, and they're just not reaching the top of our feeds. We can have access to this, but none of us has the time or maybe even the emotional stamina to search through all the doom and gloom news to find what's right with the world. Okay, enter the Goodness Exchange. There, we are giving instant access to positive news for curious people. Did you hear about the recent Harvard study that found that exposure to just 4 minutes of good news can make you 32% less anxious and 18% more optimistic? Well, I don't know about you, but I need those kind of numbers in my life. So, if you want to live with more joy and way less fear, it's really simple. First, you join us at the Goodness Exchange. Our subscription model is a pay what you can model so that everyone around the world has the opportunity to access this kind of content. And we've promised no politics and no ads for about a decade, so you're safe from all that distraction as well. Second, you allow this new, more positive, balanced worldview to put a spring in your step again. It can change the way you react to your kids, your coworkers, everybody you come in contact with. And the stories we write about can make you the idea person in your circles. These challenging times call for us to wake up and take control of our perspective. The people who use the Goodness Exchange have the ability to react to the harshness of the world much different because they know way more about what's right with the world. And that's a resource. So, subscribe to the Goodness Exchange, our YouTube channel, and the podcast, and use this content to live a more expansive worldview. It is still an amazing world out there, and you can be a part of it. Welcome to the Conspiracy of Goodness. Okay, we're back. Ah, so I'm talking with Sunny Brown, a world-renowned creative, an innovator in business. So many accolades. She's been on CBS Sunday Morning twice. Her TED Talks got over 1.6 million views. And what we're talking about here is all kinds of ways that all of us, as everyday people, can tap into creativity, curiosity,
Mhm,
collaboration. Like be better in all those groups, make mistakes, do
mhm,
experiments without
mhm.
shame, all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Mhm,
And one of the things that I really wanted you to comment on was this thing that, two of your books have been translated into 25 languages. And
mhm.
when I hear that about somebody's books, I mean, these must be very beloved books to people. And
Yeah.
you must have cracked the code on something that we all have in common because books don't resonate like that across cultures if you haven't
Mhm.
found something that's inside all of us. Talk to
Universal.
yeah, talk to me about some observations you have about all of us.
Well, that's so interesting because the I'm working on a book now. So there's two ways I wanted to go with that was about doodling, like why I chose that as a topic,
Mhm.
and it just has to do with that it was universal. And I think to your point, the most resonant books are have a through line to our humanity,
Mm.
and they touch in. So it's like you don't even have to be a doodler to appreciate that book because it's really about permission that you don't need from me, right? But and it's also about exploration and like following a thread into an unknown territory. And for me, the metaphor was doodling, but it was just a metaphor. It was
Yeah.
just a way to get people into an inquiry,
Okay.
you know?
And
Um,
just to, I do think though we can't get through this interview without talking because that is such an important part of what people will stumble on if they Googled you.
right,
Um,
totally.
I found very interesting since we're there. Some of before we dive deep into our shared humanity, tell us some of the science about doodling because some people listening to this, I am a doodler. I have
Mhm.
spent my entire life in high business circles
Yeah.
and very important continuing education courses doodling away through the whole entire thing and having the person next to me looking over with disdain, as if
Uh-huh.
I'm not listening. So, for all the doodlers out there, let's just get the science on doodling
Yeah.
and what it does to our brain and memory
Well,
and all that.
totally. I'm glad. Like we should have a doodle revolutionary moment,
Okay.
because the reason I got real fired up about it, and then invited people into a conversation about visual language and visual literacy, is because I observed people doing it all over the world because I was teaching visual facilitation,
Okay.
and then I was teaching like visual language, and then I was talking to people, and then I was like, "Wait a second! So this is a universal activity. It's grounding people in comprehension." And it's also awakening their imagination. It's helping them understand things. It's helping them make relationships spatially, et cetera, et cetera. It's doing all these wonderful things. And yet it's condemned, like in every environment where thinking is required. And I was just like, this does not work for me. Like, this is not okay with me.
Didn't the news make some big deal of a president's doodle at some
Oh
point,
yeah,
wasn't there?
because I started talking about that because I was trying to give credibility to visual language, and I was like, I don't think you guys understand. Like, if you look at the notebooks of our most beloved, celebrated thinkers and mathematicians and physicists and artists, they're all using visual language, and they're doing it spontaneously, and they're so it's a thinking companion. And so, how dare you, like tell students, young kids, like young people that somehow it's not acceptable, it's not appropriate, they don't have a right to bring that into an environment. I mean, it just I was incensed, and even talking about it now, I'm still incensed, because the effect is not good. It has a deleterious effect on people who are neurodivergent and who have diversity of learning styles, and it's just a missed opportunity. It's just silly. It's like, what is the problem exactly? Like, no one can name the problem. I can. It's like that quote from Maya Angelou, I think, about hate has created problems but it hasn't solved any.
Mm.
I'm like, this is not solving any problems, it's creating them. Besides,
Because the news, would they catch, was it a President Obama? Some president
I was
doodling
Clinton.
President Clinton do and then it turns out people were making fun of something that was actually Bill Gates's doodle as well.
That was a great little moment. It was like at the Davos Forum, the economic forum. And I remember Gates got blamed. No, but he didn't get, Clinton got blamed for it, but Gates was the one, it was his. But
That
the
was his
point for me was like, why are you blaming anyone? There's no problem. Like, why would you shame someone for needing to use that medium to stay connected to the present moment, to understand what's happening, to make sense of what's happening, to remember what's happening, to innovate on what's happening?
Mhm,
Like, why would you do that?
mhm.
Because some schmuck told you a story that was false when you were 5. Like, no, sir,
Right, right. Or
not acceptable.
somebody that wasn't a visual thinker
Yeah,
criticized you. So we should
right.
probably define that right off for folks. What do
Mm.
you I know we've interviewed the
Oh,
wonderful,
God, amazing.
yeah, renowned
Yeah.
Temple Grandin. I'll
Actually, speaking of, like,
Oh,
boom.
that book. My daughter read it, cover to cover within about 2 days and
Oh,
said,
that's awesome.
"Oh, mom,
Your
this is
mind map
me."
daughter.
Yes, she
I
felt
love it.
validated in her strange way of thinking about the world.
That's amazing.
So I'll leave that
So
I'll put that
cool.
in the show notes too, the interview with Temple Grandin and the connection to her book. But
Yeah,
tell us
please.
what your definition of visual thinking is.
Oh, well, I think of it as just another modality. So I train people to think visually. Most
Okay.
people do just to navigate the world. If you're a seeing person, you on some level you have to have the capability of perceiving sensory, visual sensory information and navigating. But I actively teach people how to integrate that into their other tools. So everybody knows linguistics and they like have numbers and we have music, we have some modalities. So I teach people how to bring visual language into those landscapes. And that just means that you bring in symbols and icons and color and fonts and things that are images, like whatever you can do to actually not artistically render the world, but sort of spatially and conceptually and creatively render it so that you understand a subject matter better. And there is some resistance in terms of people perceive that they need to be skillful artistically. And so I'm talking about very rudimentary, very, very basic language. So if you need to draw a molecule, like what you can write about a molecule and you should, but you should also draw it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that, those things complement each other. And so
Yeah.
they're companions in the thinking process.
Mhm.
And I collected so many stories because I talked to thousands of people over during the Doodle Revolutionary, the peak of those years, and it literally helps people pass certain subjects that they could not pass otherwise, like organic chemistry.
Mhm.
It helps physicists understand the nature of the universe. It's like to take it out is just silly. There's
Yeah.
no value from doing that.
Yeah, and I think that there's Temple's big point in that
Mm.
interview is that we are building systems in our world that do not reward visual thinkers or
Yeah, she was talking
and
about mechanical. Like,
yes,
remember
and
how
that the
concerned she was? Yeah.
right, the people who
Mhm.
can see how things could be or could be
Yeah.
designed,
Hmm.
we're not rewarding that ability. We're just rewarding the people who can once they're told that this needs to be done,
Hmm.
they can create it, but
Yeah.
not the people who can imagine it long
Imagine it.
before it's ever started.
Yeah, and I remember one of her cautionary tales was like, "You like elevators that function, right?"
Yes.
Because she was saying that if you don't have people who conceptually and mechanically can model these machines, then they break down,
Yeah.
and then you don't have, just basic, maintenance of things that you take for granted, that
Yeah.
you just assume just run themselves.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I appreciate her because of the pragmatism of her approach. Like
Yeah.
she's actively out there doing like saving the lives of animals in terms of their suffering and
Mhm.
minimizing suffering. I mean, she's like one of my heroes.
Yeah, she's I'm gonna introduce you to her very soon.
That would be amazing.
Okay, so let's get back to this. Having your books translated into 25 languages tells you about people and creativity and what
Hmm.
we're all doing.
Well, I am always working on books. I don't know if we talked about that, but they've done that for me, right? So like
Okay.
they've sort of pulled me from the brink many times. There's so many books.
Mm,
I actually somebody asked me the other day, what are like top 3 books that you
yeah.
would say were like turning points for you?
Okay.
And just the fact that books have that power is such a special thing about them. You
Yeah. Do
know,
you want to share that with us? What
well,
three
it's
books?
funny because they would be weird. Like one of them that was a big turning point, which I had to turn back up from, was like it wasn't the Fountainhead. It was Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Oh, you're kidding me!
No. That was
God, I
one of
mean,
the first big tomes I ever
yes,
read.
yes. And it's like she clearly has a point of view.
Yes.
And I remember I got very like ruthless and individualistic for a while.
Yeah. And then you had to turn back from it.
That's right, I did.
Yeah.
So that was a fun one. And then The War of Art, which was Stephen Pressfield.
Mhm.
It's like just about overcoming resistance and creativity. And then most recently was this one called The Misfits Manifesto. Because I remember, my life has been very twisty and turny, and it's not coherent narrative in many,
Okay.
many ways. Not that anybody's is, but some people's have less disruption. And so I remember reading the Misfits Manifesto and being like, oh, yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm totally fine. So I like writing in even small things. Like I publish on Substack, and I like writing even small things where people see ourselves in each other so
Mm,
that you just feel less alone and you
mhm.
feel supported and loved, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Nice.
Hmm.
Okay, so back to what do you think it means when your books get translated into 25 languages? What does it tell
Oh,
you about all of us? What do we have
I,
in common?
I thought that when I was surprised, frankly, like because we don't. My two books that I've written are creativity and business books. The first one was called Game Storming, and it's really about multisensory facilitation and collaboration techniques. And then the second one is called The Doodle Revolution, and it was about visual thinking and the application of it. And honestly, I think there's outstanding books people write that don't get a fanfare and that don't get translated and that don't even get published. So I think the success of those was timing and luck and hard work and great PR,
Yeah.
so it's kind of randomized.
Yeah.
And the one I'm working on now is called, I think it's one I mentioned to you, called A Good Life is an Inside Job.
Mhm.
And so that one is the application of visual and design thinking methodologies for inner science, for sort of self authoring and self leadership.
Yeah.
And so, if anything was going to be translated into a bunch of languages, I would hope it is that book because it's
Mhm.
the one is dearest to my heart.
Yeah.
You know,
Now, is it finished and out or when it is supposed to be out?
no, it's in a proposal form. I've actually
Okay.
pitched it, and because I don't know if you've been through the publishing process
I
or have
have.
talked to authors who have. Yeah, you have. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's like a slog. It's just a slog, and so and so I'm revising a methodology, and then I'll pitch it again. But
Okay.
yeah, no.
Okay. So give us a little bit about that because I think it has something to do with the topic I wanted to ask you about, which was deep self design.
Hmm.
You talk to people about that all the time. What does that mean?
Yeah. So for me, and this is the part where I was describing how my life has been wonky and weird and wonderful and wild.
Mhm.
Like when you have a really creative, divergent brain, you don't necessarily fit the mold. And when you add like complex trauma to that brain, then you have the potential for a volatile mix. And so over the course of my journey as a human being, there have been like just collapses, like what psychologists would call a disintegration, and I would call a spiritual emergency. And so you know, and so I've had my share of those experiences. And when I don't know if you know Oliver Sacks, do you remember
Oh,
him?
sure, absolutely. The man who mistook his wife for a
What's your hat?
hat rack.
Yeah, I just love him so much.
Yeah.
And one of the quotes that he says that I always return to is that when you understand something when it breaks down. And
Mhm.
so when my mind when the center could not hold, then I had the opportunity to understand how it worked. My mind and heart, like in right, like then.
Mhm.
So it's not a bad thing. It can be something that you can restore and repair, like kintsugi with the gold,
Right.
right. And so,
That's an
but
engineering that's an engineering philosophy, right? You never
what?
understand that you appreciate you understand things most when they're coming apart.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense to me, but
Yes.
no, I didn't know it was like in
Yeah.
some schools of engineering, but it makes sense. And so in a way, it was this huge gift because then I got to understand the black box, so to speak. And I want to add that it's heart mind. So there's a word in Mandarin and in Chinese that is called Xin, Xin, and it means heart mind. So it's not. I don't think of my brain as like separate from my body, and
Mhm.
it's sort of a system. And so all of that I mean, I know it all happens in the brain, but
Mhm.
like it's sort of there's emotion and there's layers of spirituality and then there's brain. And so it all fell apart more than once. And so I figured out how to work it together. And then I created a methodology called deep self design to support like the most elegant way of befriending yourself, you know, so that you can come back together and do the work that you might be invited to do by life.
Okay, we can't that's such a great statement. So that you can do the work that you are
Invited to do by
invited
life.
to do by life. I like the word invited there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
talk
how
to us. So many people are searching for meaning and purpose these
yeah.
days. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I wish that I may they all find it. I mean, it's like I have purpose envy in the sense that if I see somebody who is full on living in their element, like that Sir Ken Robinson, that video about the element.
No,
And
I
it
don't.
was you would love him, but it's just
Okay.
about the overlap of like I don't even know if he includes what's needed, but it's like what you're skillful at, what you love, and maybe the third is what's needed
Mhm.
or what contributes, what's nourishing maybe to others.
I think it's what's needed by others. Yeah,
Yeah, I wonder. I
Yeah,
wonder.
now that I'm
It
thinking
would
about it,
make
I do. Yeah.
okay, yeah, I figured you would.
It's a
There's
hobby. The difference between it's kinda like the difference between a
you wanna call
hobby
it
and
ikigai?
yeah, something like that is
Yeah,
that thing that you might love to do, but if it's
yeah.
not needed by others, you're not gonna make a living at it.
Yeah, right. You can't
It
give
can't
it you can't give it
yeah,
wings. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
you could, but you'd suffer a lot. But,
yeah.
yeah, and so I wouldn't say I'm not riding that wave quite yet. Like,
Mhm.
there's been times when I've surfed some good, some good waves, but I'm in like the big one where you really are in your zone of genius wholeheartedly and entirely. I just think that if anybody ever gets there, I mean, that's the most
Yes.
fortunate life path in this incarnation that you can get, you know?
Yes, yes.
And so I'm not upset that I'm not there, but I'm going to keep trying to show up and find it. It's like a fine-tuning process.
Mhm.
It
Well,
is.
you and I talked about could we be humble to our own detriment sometimes? Like I mentioned to you in our pre-call that a
Mhm.
lot of times these amazing thought leaders that I talk to are
Mhm.
so darn humble
Mhm.
that they barely even recognize, much less would call whatever they're being celebrated for by others their
Mhm.
zone of genius.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
I love that expression, zone of genius, because
oh,
every one of us has one for the time
for
being.
sure.
You know, a 10-year-old who just knows how to keep his alcoholic dad from beating up mom
Right.
has developed a zone of genius
No doubt.
for doing that, right?
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if the emergent capacity is inherently proportionate to the conditioning, you know, because it's not an accident that my passion is related to the nourishment and restoration of others. That's not an accident, you know, that's direct function of my early conditions. So
Right.
and so that's like the gold from the shadow, or like mixing metaphors, but that's the
Yeah.
sort of the lotus from the mud. It's like it's not. And I used to resent the Enneagram, because the Enneagram is this personality test. It's very beloved. It's been around for like the 70s, and they always talk about this one core wound out of
Uh-huh.
which your behaviors come.
Yeah.
And I don't like being pigeonholed, and I don't like being
Yes.
sort of prescribed something, but I understand what they're getting at on some level, which has to do with the gift of the challenge, the gift of adversity,
Yeah.
and a specific type of adversity, like people, a direct relationship is like, I'm obsessed with curing cancer because my mom died of cancer when I was 8, right? That's like an obvious one. But
Mhm.
sometimes it's less obvious, but you can still see the root there. And so,
Yes.
and that's good. That's the spiritual path, you
And
know?
maybe that's our only way forward without suffering from trauma, is to
Right.
find the
To make
gift in it,
something. Yeah.
to make something of it.
Absolutely. I know. And that's what, you have to choose that, it's like, because it's difficult and painful and,
Yeah.
complicated, and
Mhm.
you can hide from it. And people do. I call it cocooning, where you just will not answer the call that your life has invited you into. You're just not going to do it. And, you know, you kind of shrink back into the cocoon and miss that opportunity to polish the gold, you know?
So we're very close to the edges of this topic, so I will go there now. So it
Mhm.
sounds like, you didn't grow up with privilege, and
No.
yet now you're a celebrated person of great creativity, and you're adding to the world something that couldn't be there without you because of your unique alchemy that came from adversity and so forth.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
talk to us about this. I believe that everybody is uniquely built to contribute something,
Mhm.
and that could be like on a micro level in this
Yeah.
meeting, in this conversation,
Yeah.
in this dinner tonight, or it could be in a
Mhm.
macro level some way. Talk to us
Yeah.
about what you've discovered about human contribution and creativity and all that.
Well, I think that, kind of going back to your other point about humility and people sort of unwillingness to sing their own song or sort of celebrate their own capabilities, I think that, that's common,
Okay.
and it doesn't serve. I understand why it would be fearful, because sometimes you want your gift to be a different one. You
Mm.
know, it's like my husband, he'll be like, we were talking about this variety show that's coming up in my friend's backyard, and you can just perform anything. You can go up and do whatever you want, whatever your gift is, you can just do
Okay.
a ditty. And I was like, what would you do, Chet? And I could tell it really ruffled him because the things that he's skillful at are not demonstrative. They're not things you do on the stage. They're not things that are like people would necessarily get. They're not move people.
Yeah.
And I was like, but you could play a background of stars with black holes in the sun and then tell them a story about how matter and dark matter are related. Like, that's a gift,
Yes. That's a gift.
right? So
Yes.
it's just, my point is that everybody has, like, to your point, some beautiful, unique thing that is signature to them. And it's not about judging it, or I mean, sure, I wish I was like Mariah Carey's voice. I would love that. That'd be amazing. It's not what I got.
Yeah.
So it's just like finding what you got and working with it and celebrating it and sharing it, because if you're too humble, then how am I supposed to know what you're
Mhm.
good at? And
Mhm.
how can I put you in a situation that will support the flourishing of that gift? Like, it's like cheating other people too.
Right.
I can't even help you shine because I don't know what you want to shine at.
Yeah, and I think it's a positive use of our digital lives to help other
Mm.
people shine.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's such a good point. Because this is why I love when Flint showed me what you were doing. I was like, God bless her soul, because like, because there's such crap and bad news and
Yeah.
just addiction of,
Mhm.
and it's so, oh man, it's just such a mess. And so I love that it must feel good for you to like scour this landscape and find the nuggets. Like,
Yes.
that has to feel
It's
good.
so I just after 10 years of doing it, as far
Mm.
as we know, the
Mhm.
only folks doing it at the level that we are, with no politics and no ads,
Yeah.
nothing to taint what we put out or what we
Yeah.
are searching for. Like,
Mm.
I don't see the world that everyone else sees on the screens in their life,
Yeah, that's
because
amazing.
I never click on anything out of anger, fear, or boredom. Never.
That's beautiful.
That's the trick. If anybody wants to know how to see a much better picture of reality, just stop clicking out
Yes.
of those 3 things. ABC, I call it: anger,
You're
boredom, and curiosity. Like the
uh-huh.
morbid kind of curiosity, like
Oh, right, right, like doom scrolling, what they call doom
yeah,
scrolling.
yeah. The thing is, also, I just believe in people. I just have met so many
Wow.
people who could seem sour on the outside, or who could be trying to push my buttons, or who could have some assumptions or whatever. And me, I just believe so much in them that there's
Mhm.
something in there that I would
Mhm.
find curious, and that I could connect to, that I just keep at it until I find what that is. It's
But you must transform people. See, I'm having a hard time with this because I think that you bring that out, right? So if you're assuming the best in them, then you're
yes.
calling forward the best.
Yes.
And so I got so cynical because I used to have that superpower too.
Mhm.
And then I got all busted and I lost faith. And then I'm actually in the process of restoring uh,
Mhm.
a more well rounded faith
Mhm.
in humanity, so to speak. And I don't mean it in a kind of like Pollyanna way. I mean, really
Mhm.
in loving what we can do and what we
Mhm.
are, and the messiness. Like, I'm
Mhm.
really working to come back to that place, because is it fair if you're summoning that in me, does that mean that I'm actually like that? Do you know what
Mhm.
I mean? Does that make sense? Like, yeah, I know that I am.
Well,
Yeah,
let me give you a quick example, and
yeah,
I'm going to do this, and put the focus on the story instead of you. And I do want this interview to be all about you and your zone of genius, but it's a practical thing I can share with people. So, being
cool.
a dentist, some people know I was a dentist for 30 years, and I had a terrible accent and lost feeling in my left hand. Then I couldn't be a dentist anymore. And one of the things I learned, because you have to get into a total relationship of trust, a
Hmm.
deep, you're going to do something hard, very hard, with another human being. You're going to
Hmm.
violate their personal space. You're going to go into one of the most intimate spots in their whole body, all this stuff. And it
Hmm.
all has to be working to do it right in a beautiful way and feel like you did good in the world all day long. So,
Hmm.
I'm an animal lover. I'm a seriously big animal lover, and I live in Vermont, where during hunting season, deer hunting season,
Mhm.
I got to figure out a new way to be in the world with every single man that sits down in the chair. And I have to say, so John, did you get your deer this year?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now, that became right off. I figured out that that sentence, though I really didn't care about the answer
Yeah, right.
because I kind of
You're like,
didn't
"I
want
don't
them to get
know
there.
if I wanna." Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that I'm against hunting. I come from a
I know,
long
but
line.
I understand what you mean, animals.
Okay, but I could recognize where I was not in sync with them in something. But
Yeah.
here's what I would do. I would say, "John, you have a deer stand, right?
Mhm.
And you sit there in the woods for hours without moving.
Mm.
Tell me what you see. Tell me
Mhm.
what you hear
Mm.
all around you." Because
Mhm.
I am a nature nerd, and I learned that once I found this place that was
Yeah,
inside the practice of hunting,
yeah.
though the big scope didn't of hunting didn't, it wasn't something I grew up with and I didn't know
You could
anything about
relate to
really.
it.
Neither
Yeah,
good nor bad, I just didn't know anything about it to connect.
yeah,
What I
uh,
did was I found that a place where I could connect with every single hunter, and I
yeah.
could say, "John, tell me what you notice in the woods."
Mhm.
And for 30 years, they would say the most extraordinary things.
Oh, it's such a incredible thing. Ugh,
We can
it's
do that with others.
I know, and I will again. Like, I really had got rattled. You know, like, and I think that's just what I else think. I think that when you have this learning, this massive learning process, that's if you're showing up and you're in the arena, so to speak, and you're doing the curiosity and you're getting your head hit against walls and you're learning and you're
Mhm.
growing, then there are these times of like almost like accelerated equilibriums where you're like something will happen to you or to someone you love or whatever that will completely rattle your
Mhm.
framework and
Yes.
your structure, your architecture of belief. And then there's a reassembly that has to occur. And so I think it's like more I'm glad you're holding that space for me to return to, because I do love the common humanity, peace.
Yes.
That's like my
Yes.
favorite place, you know.
Hunting is what people have had to do for
Well, and no, and
200,000 years. It's neither
well,
good nor bad.
well,
But
that's the thing. It's like I would never start judging someone, where they, because that's just a shutdown right out of the gate.
yes, right out of the
But
gate.
to your point, you asked him a open-ended question that allowed for storytelling, and then suddenly you're in a whole different way of being, you
Together.
know? Right, while you're doing, like, intimate hard work.
Yeah. But,
It's so
I'm give
interesting.
when I do give 'em a chance to talk, I mean, I'm hanging on their every word.
Yeah,
And,
you listen.
there's something about that is being totally
Yeah,
present in somebody else's story and lived experience.
yes. It's my favorite thing. I think that's why I like books
Yeah.
so much, and
Yeah.
I'm constantly trying to imagine. The other day, it occurred to me that if I were, acting is probably that aspect of it would be super fascinating. I've never been drawn to it because of the pretend. I perceived it as like playing pretend for a living, but the empathy piece,
Yeah.
like where you have to sort of occupy the lived experience of a person that you may have not like very little overtly or even under the cover in common with, and that you may not even want to know how
Mhm.
they think. Like if you're playing a criminal mind or a manipulative, that would be scary to occupy that way of life, but it would generate a sense of how someone gets to that state of mind.
And
And I
it
think
may be one of those challenging opportunities in life, like we were just talking about, to set our own
Mhm.
stuff so far aside that we
Exactly.
can see that intersection between us and somebody we think is so different from us.
That's right.
My dad was a physician and one of those birth to death guys that took care of you and you had his home phone number and he made house calls.
Mm.
And in the latter part of his life, he just after he retired, he became the doctor at a maximum security prison.
Wow.
And he used to always say the stories were hard every night at dinner, cutting our meat, and he'd be telling this, he'd be telling these stories, and he always said that after about 6 months of that work, he could see that two things separated him from all these people, and it was a accident of birth and B, just turned left or turned right.
Yep.
That the moment that there
No.
couldn't be a lot of judgment involved in some situations, because if
Yeah.
you had their story, you might have
Mhm.
turned left as well
Yeah.
instead of right.
Well, that's right. And like and that's why I think what I'm grappling with is the really hard characters. So cuz I thought I had, since I'm a facilitator,
Hmm.
I have facilitated thousands and thousands of people, and by that I mean ask them to do hard weird things, interacted with them in ways that are really in a place of discomfort, productive discomfort. You remember that
Yes,
language? And I had such a strong spaciousness around welcoming all the aspects. And so the place I'm trying to expand my empathic knowing is around characters like Putin, you know, like people that are really violent perpetrators of large scale things. And so, because I think that once I have that level of attention and
yes,
spaciousness, that it's just a different practice. It's just a very different
absolutely.
practice, you know, because
I have
there.
to share I have to share something. So another fella that I interviewed recently that I know you'd love is named
Mhm.
Nipun Mehta.
Mhm.
Nipun Mehta.
Mhm.
And he is in charge of this giant organization of people around the world doing the most extraordinary things with volunteerism. And to your point about how you're trying to find the way to think about a Putin or something like that,
Yeah.
and we all
Mhm.
have those people
That's
in our
right.
lives. He said the most extraordinary thing on a call I was on the other day. Somebody asked him a question about WhatsApp, and he must have some real. He's at the highest levels of the tech industry, Nipun Mehta,
Uh-huh.
very
Uh-huh.
highest,
Uh-huh.
and he must have some problem with WhatsApp because his answer was, "Well, that's one of those things I have to build equanimity on." And then he just went on with the conversation. So we,
Love it. That's
what?
exactly what I'm saying. That's
That's
exactly
exactly what you're saying.
what I'm saying. Yeah. And I think I'm confident I'm going to get there, to be honest, like,
Yes.
because I can feel the changing in my own system. I could feel where I was contracted, and it was like a 2 year contraction, like
Yeah.
not happening. And I can feel the softening and and it's not about surrendering my point of view or
Mhm.
my experience
No.
or feeling like I don't get to be mad. It's not anything of those things. It's literally like, okay, there are aspects of reality that I need to integrate into my understanding and my embodied understanding, not my intellectual understanding. And
Right.
that just takes time.
It
It
does.
just takes a ton of time. And equanimity is absolutely the word.
The word.
And I was reading this book, and there was a line in there, and it was like, I think it was the Dalai Lama or something. And he was like, even if you can get to neutrality with your enemy, like, consider that a victory, like, you don't even have to love them, just get to
Mhm.
the and so that's my practice edge, so to speak. Yeah.
I tell you the practice I used for years in the dental office with folks who were hard to love. And I'm from the Midwest. We love everyone. In fact, I've been voted off the island in my dental practice. I'm no longer allowed to hire people because I loved
Oh.
everyone. And
You're
I
like, I
would just
see the good in that person, I see the good in that person.
right. My office manager once said, "Well, did you check her references?" And I said, "Well, she hugged me at the end of the
Yeah,
interview."
she'll grow into it, it's fine.
Right. But here's one of my practices with someone who is very hard to love and very hard to have compassion for and stuff.
Yeah.
I would imagine them as a 5-year-old.
Mhm. I know. Oh.
So if we imagine some of the worst characters in our world
Yeah. Like
as a
Hitler.
4-year-old boy or a
Mhm.
4-year-old girl, and we imagine what they saw or how adults acted around them or
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
might have happened
What
in
they
front of their
lost.
little 4-year-old eyes and
Yeah.
what was lost in their humanity
Yeah.
by that horrific thing.
Yeah.
I can generate a whole lot of imaginary mental pictures about that for even the
Right.
worst character and then just think, we are usually what happened to us when we were 4. And
Yeah.
anybody
That's
who's not a representation of what happened to them when they're 4 has worked damn hard to be a better person.
Well, that's what I'm saying, and I think that, because I do have the sense that I could be him, Putin,
Mhm.
just to take him
Mhm.
as an example. I
Mhm.
don't have a sense that, I'm morally superior or really even biologically necessarily different in a meaningful way. It's that these are like valences and, like,
Mhm.
sort of choices, and even making those choices is, available to people or not.
Mhm.
So it's funny when you were saying I didn't grow up privileged. That is correct in the traditional way that people refer to it, but I do
Yes.
think there was choices I was able to make. Like when your dad was saying, did they go left or right?
Mhm.
So, for reasons that will always be mysterious to me, I made choices that were better than in terms of my outcome for my own health and well being
Mhm.
than the choices that were presented to me and that many of my friends took. And I don't know why, really, to be, I can make up a story about why, but I can't take credit or blame.
Uh-huh.
A
Right.
little bit of it is a mystery. So that is fascinating to me, that all of
Mhm.
that complexity and the soup of it.
Mhm.
But I'm gonna use that line. I'm trying to get to equanimity in
On
that.
that. Isn't that just so
Okay,
beautiful?
really good. Perfect.
Okay, so just to, kind of start wrapping up this conversation, which has turned out to be just a long chat at 2 people's
Yeah, like
kitchen
a romp.
table. Thank you.
This is our dinner party.
Yes, yes, that we keep saying, but we're gonna have to get across
We're gonna have to
3,000
go with
miles
that.
to ever be able to do it. There's a few more things that I did want you to,
Mhm,
talk about. When you were talking about the practice and the work you've done and the self-reflection you've done, you're a
mhm,
devout student of American Zen tradition. And
mhm.
as you mentioned, this wonderful Flint Sparks is
Yeah,
a educated licensed psychologist for 40 years and
yeah,
a Zen teacher. And
that's
he is the
right,
one who introduced you and I. He
that's right.
recognized instantly that we would
Yeah,
be
clearly, he was like, okay."
just for our guests, I like I said, I come from the Midwest and a little small farming town, and I would think that Zen. Now, I
Yeah,
don't think that, but I would think that Zen is like a religion, and I would think that Zen has some kind of spooky ooky connotations to it, but
yeah,
I
yeah,
I don't think those things, but it would be easy for me to think that
understandable if you did.
there
Yeah,
was a time in my life when I did think that. So
yeah.
talk to us about the benefits of Zen because it keeps popping up all the time, and that's what
Oh,
this podcast is about, to turn people
yeah,
on to cool insights in life. Talk to us about your work and
yeah.
what it's done for you.
Oh, I love that. Well, it sort of brought me back from the brink. I mean, the way that I think of it is, in some Asian countries, like Southeast Asian countries, it is practiced as a religion, and there is a devotional aspect, and there are gods and demons and like that. There's mythologies in it.
Okay.
But American Zen is very deeply pragmatic, mostly, and it is essentially an inquiry into your relationship with reality and your perceptions of reality. And that sounds very esoteric and very sort of mysterious, but it's actually very grounded. So it's like it definitely involves silent contemplation. So you do have to slow down to practice Zen. It's not a fast practice, you know? And so, but it alleviates suffering in very real, practical ways. And so, I'll give you just the most mundane example. So, say I send an email to someone I admire or really want to talk to, and I just never hear from them, right? So I can interpret that in 12 different ways. I can make up a story about why they didn't write me back.
Okay.
And that story is mine. If I have no information from that
Yes.
person,
Right.
right? I just have narratives. And so in our practice, yeah, you start to observe the common narratives that come up in our particular signature of reality. And you start to wonder if you could just let that one maybe go or not really
Mhm.
be obsessed with that one or entertain another possibility. And then you get very facile at that dropping the narrative and just staying in a question.
Okay.
And it's a relief. It's like taking aspirin. You're just like, oh, I don't know. I do not know, but I don't have to make it about me. Something's wrong with me. I'm not good
Mhm.
enough. Like blah blah blah. All the machinations.
Mhm.
It's like an inner science and an inner engineering process, and it is definitely a compassion practice. And it's also, to your point, like that's where I'm saying it's like, where am I creating, because it's not that there's not facts about Putin. Like we
Yeah.
know that he's doing dark shit. Like
Yeah.
that's not the question. But the question is, how am I responding to that in a way that's causing me pain that I don't really need to have? It
Mhm.
doesn't mean you don't fight for things you believe in. I wouldn't use the word fight, but it means that you're sort of you still choose an ethical
Mhm.
compass and you still conduct yourself with composure and compassion and even with ferocity. But I don't have to torment myself about the rage that I
Mhm.
feel around his behavior. So it's like
Yes.
it is the greatest practice, Linda. I cannot
Okay.
say enough about Zen. It
Well, it
is,
keeps popping up in my world all around by some
yeah,
great thinkers who are who are on a path of self-discovery and creativity and
Mhm.
curiosity, and I just wanted to mention it too because I knew you would
I'm
talk in
glad you
favor of it.
did. Yeah, it's like core to my life for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And then there's a couple questions I always have to ask at the end of an interview. One is, if this interview had been only 3 minutes long,
Mhm.
I'm sure in the dark of night, or there's times when you pick up the newspaper or whatever, just things that remind you of, I really wish people knew. I have
Uh-huh.
the four shifts that I
Yeah.
really wish people knew. Every click they make is a vote, and I have a
Mhm.
little 1 minute thing I could say about that.
Oh,
What
it's
do you
awesome.
what do you really wish people knew?
Oh, I wish that they knew how powerful they are. I wish that we all understood as a sort of species that we can choose our interpretations of life and we can choose our interpretations of ourselves, right? Like we can have generosity and charitable interpretations of ourselves, not delusional, but charitable, and that we are not subject to our scripts and our history.
Right.
Those things have occurred, but they're not definitional, and we don't have to carry them into the future and keep perpetuating them. We have so much power,
Oh my
you
gosh.
know. Hmm.
That's lovely. That's lovely. And
Yeah.
that coming from a creative, we didn't even get to talk about risk, taking
Ah,
risk.
yeah,
Okay. We'll have to do another interview where we talk about risk
yeah.
because
I'll
that
come back anytime.
okay, great. All right. So as we wrap up here, tell us where people can connect next with your work. Obviously, I'm
Oh,
going to put in the show notes the
oh,
TED Talk,
thanks.
the books, the da da da. But where can
Yeah.
people connect with you next?
That's awesome. I would love it if they would join my Substack. So I just started a community on Substack called Nothing in the Way. So
Okay.
you can find me there. And I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, Sunny Brown. If you put Sunny Brown, SUNNI, I'm on all the social. But
Mhm.
Substack is where I'm spending most of my energy because I'm writing and training and teaching. And I'm going to have community experiences there. It's called
And you do
Nothing.
a lot of public speaking. You do
I
paid
haven't.
facilitation for groups and so forth.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Mhm.
like and I mean I have definitely there's if you go to sunnybrown.com or you go to deepselfdesign.com, then you can find the services
Okay.
and the books and all that stuff. But
Great.
if you just want to connect as a practitioner and a learner, then Substack's where I'm going to be.
Great. 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 And I just want to point out it's SUNNI.
That's right.
Brown. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Sunny, this has been a delight. I can't
God
tell
bless you.
you how fun it's been,
I
and
wish
and
you were
people
next door to me. It's
well,
so fun.
I tell you, this is not like a normal interview that I do, but because people really have been in on a conversation between 2 kind of
Like
like-minded
yeah.
creatives that
Yeah.
don't mind risk
Like,
and
you,
are
like, get
willing
each
to
other. I'm like, "Oh, you're like my sister, but you just live in Vermont. Got it.
yes,
Cool."
yes. So, I definitely will have Sunny back on the program, and then we'll get into some of those other serious topics that
Yeah,
that are
yeah,
important.
I would love.
If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Goodness Exchange. The Goodness
Yeah,
Exchange, as I mentioned several times,
uh-huh,
and I need people to do that to make this
of
celebration
course.
of what's right with the world. To quote the amazing DeWitt Jones, who
Mm,
is a neighbor to Flint
mhm.
Sparks.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? On the smallest island ever, it's like, "What?"
Yes. Yeah, that's another okay, in the show notes, one of the
Yeah,
greatest TED Talks ever is called "Celebrate with What's Right with the World" with,
nice.
DeWitt Jones. So the way to support what we're doing here at the Goodness Exchange and the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast is to
Mhm,
subscribe over there and make it a
mhm.
discipline. Talk about a practice. Decide that
Yeah,
you're gonna fill your cup with something good that's happening in the world every day. Something
yeah.
substantially good, not puppies in mailboxes, but,
No, but like
the fact
something
that
deeply
yeah.
yeah,
These are real stories, thousands of stories and interviews with people
wow.
who are changing the future for us all. And I hope the connections to goodness and progress that Sunny and I shared with you today carry you through your week, and you'll start seeing all the joy and wonder that we come across so often.
Oh, you're just like a gift to all of us. You're living
Ah,
in your function, you know?
yes,
And
I think so. I
yeah,
think so. All right, thanks. Have a good week.
and you too.